All right, welcome in West Palm Beach. I've got the outfit on. NFL party is tonight. Was at the owners' meetings today over at the Breakers, heading back there right after this, and obviously back there again tomorrow for day 2 of the event. This is 49ers Intel from the owners' meetings. Now, the link to the article, John Lynch expects Brock Purdy contract to vault the 49ers back up the NFL's spending list. That link is in the description, so go ahead and check it out. If you read anything about the owners' meetings today, make sure you read that. I guarantee you it is the most comprehensive account, as you could see me scrolling up and down through it, most comprehensive account of what John Lynch actually said today at the NFL owners' meetings. Again, we've got so many misinterpretations. It's crazy, actually, when you look at all the stuff, all the tweets and, all the posts that are coming out of John Lynch's 25-minute session today at the owners' meetings. And so many of them are off base. And some of them, I write something and then my words just get completely twisted and aggregated in some weird way. So why don't we sit down right now and talk about what John Lynch actually said at the owners' meetings. And if you want to follow along, go ahead and check out the San Francisco Standard. Link, again, is in the description. Maybe Mike can even toss it up there into the comment section. First off, Brock Purdy. As you can tell from the headline, John Lynch expects Brock Purdy's contract to vault the 49ers back up the NFL spending list to maybe even number 1. But this is Lynch's exact quote. I think we're going to get the deal done. That's what I believe. The cash spending is down, but the year's not over. If and when we get our quarterback done, we'll probably again be a top 2 or top 3 cash spending team. So, this is, I think, one of the most important points to hammer home, because so many people are going around trying to say that the 49ers are cheap. Well, how can you say that they're cheap when they were the second highest cash spend team last season and are on track to be the second or third highest cash spending team this season? And they've been top 5 throughout the entirety of the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era. At some point, your feelings don't matter, and we're just dealing with facts. At some point, you cannot dictate your own truth. The truth is that the 49ers spend X amount, and that X amount has ranked in the top 5, even the top 3 or the top 2 in recent years, and it's on pace to be at that again when they get this contract done with Brock Purdy. On top of that, it seems that there's motivation from both sides to get this contract done quickly. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to happen. John Lynch isn't sure if this is going to happen either, but he pointed out that I don't think it's too optimistic to say that a deal could be done before the start of the offseason program. This is a word, or this is a sentence that a lot of people misinterpreted. And I can't help you if you misinterpret this. I don't think it's that hard to interpret. But Lynch said there's motivation on both sides. I don't think it's too optimistic. I understand why Brock wants that. We've just got to find that right place for both sides. I would love nothing more than a quick contract resolution. So Lynch is saying, I think that it's totally logical to be optimistic about something getting done early. When we talk about APY, we've heard the full gamut. We've heard this massive range. We've heard numbers in the 40s to numbers in the 50s to numbers in the 60s. At the end of the day, things are probably going to fall roughly in the middle of the extremes that we have heard. And if that ends up being the case, then the 49ers and Brock Purdy will probably both be happy, because market rate for a quarterback is market rate, especially a quarterback as good as Brock Purdy. He's been number 1 in efficiency ever since he joined the league back in 2022. Number 1, like literally nobody above him when it comes to efficiency per play, when it comes to QBR, when it comes to standard QB rating. There's something to be said about that. Only down to number 7 in QBR this past season. So the 49ers are obviously locking in around Brock Purdy. This whole financial reset, the drawback of spending from number 2 to number 16, only to vault back up to number 2 or 3 when Brock Purdy's contract is done, that is all orchestrated around the fact that they believe that this guy is an A-list franchise quarterback. And John Lynch today talked a lot about A-list core players. How about this? We're going to go to core theory at this point. Lynch said this, and it's funny because it echoes a lot of what I was saying over the course of the past couple of weeks, including the same types of buzzwords. But he said, we still have a lot of Hall of Fame worthy players. There's a tremendous core that we can go be really competitive with and go add some young players to. It will be exciting for our roster and necessary. I think it's a good recipe when you add to our core of established stars with a draft class like we had last year. I think there's a lot of opportunity to infuse youth, and hopefully with youth comes health into our roster. Now, this right here, the word health is one that came up over and over again. This is at the center of what the 49ers are doing strategically this offseason. I'll repeat, they were too old, too slow, too injured, and not hungry enough to do what they needed to do last season. They finished 6-11, and that's something that John Lynch called embarrassing. We were 6-11. No matter how we got there, that's embarrassing. I don't ever want to be 6-11 again. The draft is an important part of fixing that. So the answer to this 6-11 record, the way to make the football team better for San Francisco is to focus on youth, because John Lynch believes, and I think that the data supports his belief, that youth means a greater likelihood of health, which obviously means a greater likelihood of availability, which obviously means axing the problem, the biggest problem that faced the 49ers in 2024. So the 49ers have their established core. You see Lynch talking about it right here. I will open up the 49ers 90-man depth chart so we can take a little closer peek into the core players on this football team. They're highlighted in yellow. As you can see here, core players at almost every single position group. We'll see if Brandon Ayuk, by the way, works himself back into that mix. He's going to be staying with the 49ers. But Purdy, McCaffrey, Juszczyk, Kittle, Williams, Bosa, Warner, Deommodore Lenoir, maybe Malik Mustafa in the future. 49ers have dudes at almost every single position. Receiver TBD. Ayuk's got to come back from that ACL, MCL tear. But that only accounts for a small percentage of the roster. So they've got these, they've got a few Hall of Fame worthy players. John Lynch is not wrong. He doesn't like to toss that word around all too liberally, but he did use it today. That is a tremendous core. If Christian McCaffrey is healthy and delivers for the 49ers, if Purdy is healthy, if Trent Williams is healthy, if Kittle's healthy, they can go a long way. But they've got to fill the meat of the roster beyond just the core. Spots 10 to 53, they've got to fill it with available speed, hungry speed, and motivated speed. And that comes through the NFL draft. That comes through young players. That's the recipe that they're using, and that's what you see in this quote from John Lynch. Here's what he said about Brandon Ayuk. The deadline is tomorrow, the unofficial trade deadline for Brandon Ayuk. I expect Brandon to be a part of us, John Lynch said. He said that the 49ers have no regrets about the $120 million contract extension that they awarded Brandon Ayuk. I think they might have some regrets. I think that that's complicated. The 49ers have their backs pushed up against the wall here. Brandon Ayuk is currently hurt. You can't trade out of the contract even if you tried to build an escape clause because of the injury guarantee, because the fact that nobody would want to trade for an injured player. So the 49ers path here really is dictated, but there's a lot of reason to still believe in Brandon Ayuk as well. And you go back to the tape and how talented he is and how he performed in 2023. And perhaps a motivated Brandon Ayuk, perhaps the 49ers ran some motivational tactics this offseason. They might have let some of this trade talk really roar intentionally this offseason. This is just me speculating, but maybe that's something that gets Brandon Ayuk going. Maybe, the indication that the 49ers might have soured on him a little bit, might have grown tired of the antics during the contract hold-in last offseason. Maybe that is what makes Brandon Ayuk really want to go prove himself after he comes back from the ACL tear. It might not be until mid-season, but Ayuk said that he expects Brandon to be a part of us. We love Brandon Ayuk as a football player. We did when we drafted him, and we're excited to move forward with him. So, that should essentially close that case. We knew that a trade was very unlikely throughout. That's what, I could continue to repeating. But now that April 1st is almost here and we've now heard from John Lynch, I think that you can close that chapter. You could turn the page on that chapter, if you will. Some more financial maneuvering here for the 49ers and financial discussion. This was interesting to me. John Lynch said, as of right now, we're over the cap, the salary cap, by a significant amount in 2026. So we talk about cap space rolling over for year to year. And one of the big things that I've tried to hammer home is that the salary cap situation is connected from year to year and that the 49ers are looking several years out. 2025 is now, but there's 2026, there's 2027, there's 2028. Well, with all of that long-term view taking big importance with the 49ers, I think a lot of people would be wise to constantly check that 2026 situation to see how the contracts are hitting in that year. And John Lynch pointed out that the 49ers are actually over the cap by a significant amount in 2026. To give you an exact prognosis of the salary cap, then the 49ers have $245 million of liabilities set to hit the cap in 2026. So I did some investigation, right? I wanted to see what exactly John Lynch was talking about with this quote. And we don't know what the exact salary cap will be, first off. But the 49ers, I'm sure, have their projection. The projection might be $300 million. It was $279.2 million this season. It's almost certainly going to be higher in 2026. So $245 in liabilities, $300 million cap. That's still $55 million in space. I'm guessing that with this quote right here, John Lynch is already counting a potential Brock Purdy contract. And he might already be counting other expenditures like the 49ers re-signing George Kittle, like the 49ers re-signing Fred Warner. They are interested in re-signing their pillars. The one central tenet of what the 49ers are doing right now that a lot of people are missing is that they're not letting A-list players who they expect to perform as A-listers moving forward out the door. In fact, they're planning to double down on those players. So somebody like George Kittle, they think he's still got several A-list years left. Brock Purdy, A-list year, A-list career in front of him. Fred Warner, they still think that he has got A-list years left. They didn't necessarily think so with Dre Greenlaw, at least more than a couple A-list years left, maybe not even more than one. I mean, we'll see how much Dre Greenlaw plays this year for the Denver Broncos, but they saw the red flag, obviously, with only 35 snaps coming off the Achilles injury. Anyway, the money that the 49ers are planning to pour into these guys they project to be A-list foundational pillars moving forward, I think John Lynch is accounting for it when he talks about the 49ers being over the cap in 2026. So in a lot of ways, this is financial housekeeping that we're seeing from the 49ers ahead of giving Brock Purdy his big contract, which could be coming soon, that's going to ensure that they do not hit salary cap hell like the Rams did in 2023 once 2026 comes along. So if you're wondering about Malik Collins, you're wondering about Javon Hargrave, you're wondering about Leonard Floyd, those are all moves that save the 49ers a tremendous amount of money. If you add it out all together, this was, I think, over $100 million in savings for San Francisco over the long run of the salary cap. And we've got to view this salary cap situation is interconnected from year to year. So read this from Lynch. A lot of these moves are set up for that. We're just trying to keep a healthy fiscal situation. Then John Lynch talked a little bit about the offensive line. This is one that's probably upsetting some people, although I think it's more ado about nothing. He did say the 49ers would certainly look to improve the offensive line to the NFL draft. I think that's what's most important. You've got 11 draft picks. The offensive line is important. We get that, and you should try to improve the draft however you can. 49ers will have their process of doing so. So he verified that, but he also said this. He said he thought the 49ers have had good performance at right tackle, so that's Colton McKivitz, and at center with Jake Brendel. I think that Jake Brendel did regress. You guys know my feelings on that matter. I think that Colton McKivitz is for really good value for his $6 million contract at right tackle, middle of the pack stats. Not all that different from Mike McGlinchey, but Lynch basically said he doesn't pay attention to social media here. That's something, this is on the offensive line. That's something where I don't follow the X narrative on how our guys are. we evaluate our players and we think we've got a pretty steady group. Now, when Trent Williams is down, you're not going to be quite as good. So obviously the loss of Trent Williams was a blow for the 49ers this past season. And they're going to have him back and at 100% in 2025. That is a big component of the 49ers plans, their return to a winning record. I mean, they invested a ton into Trent Williams before the start of last offseason, or the start of last season, because that dragged out through the offseason. And he's going to have to deliver for them for at least this next year before another potential option bonus kicks in 2027. So it's not rocket science to realize that Trent Williams is a very, very critical part of this San Francisco 49ers team. So that's his take on the offensive line. I don't think that it points an arrow in one direction or the other. I think that San Francisco is obviously going to look in the draft for an offensive tackle. They've got really, really high demands for their offensive tackles in the draft as far as physical characteristics. And normally that type of player doesn't drop all too far below the top 10 picks. And we know the 49ers are at number 11. There are a trio of offensive tackles expected to go high in this draft in Armand Membou, Will Campbell, and Calvin Banks. Maybe only Banks is available once the 49ers are at number 11. That could very well be the pick. Maybe Membou drops. I mean, it's so everybody acts like they've got it all figured out with the NFL draft, but trust me, you don't. There's something that's going to surprise you, and it's going to surprise you relatively early in this NFL draft. You don't have it figured out if you think that you do. So, to act like we know exactly how the 49ers are going to operate at number 11 or what they're going to do is foolish. But I do think that offensive line and an offensive tackle is on their radar. McKivitz is only under contract through this one more season. So they're going to have to add tackle help somehow, some way, whether it be through an extension of McKivitz or through a new body. And when you look at the fact that Trent Williams is my age, Trent Williams is 36 years old, well, then you start to say, okay, maybe since they're this high up in the draft and they don't plan on drafting this high again in the near future, they're hoping that Brock Purdy's taking them to the playoffs every year. Maybe this is the year to grab your offensive tackle. Other quote from John Lynch. This is a little bit more of a summary quote. And, we've been talking about this always being about the draft. Well, yes, it has always been about the draft. We had a great roster last year, but we were very injured, John Lynch said. The key is to get back and stay healthy. Notice that I said that healthy, that was the common refrain, right? We keep on hearing about the 49ers and they need to stay healthy. That's obviously what they're focusing on with this roster renovation this offseason. We have a bunch of draft picks this year and next year to replenish our team with youth. We've got to make the draft choices count. There's slots we've got to fill with these guys. It's daunting. It's exhilarating. But I like our process. We've refined it over the years. The draft is the best representation of our organization coming together for one purpose. The line that really stood out to me here was, I like our process. We've refined it over the years. Some context. They didn't draft well in 2022 and 2023, especially. 2021, a little bit better, but that was the year that you burned the Trey Lance capital, right? And obviously the Lance pick didn't work out all too well. Although they got Talanoa Hufanga and Elijah Mitchell, who ended up being a good running back for them before the injuries crippled his career. But I think 2022 and 2023 were the draft classes that really put the 49ers under the gun. And 2024 got them back off the mat. They drafted really, really well last offseason. So when Lynch says stuff like this, I like our process. We've refined it over the years. It shows me that he thinks that, perhaps the 49ers have taken a step forward in terms of their drafting ability. And why is that important? Well, because they're going to have the most picks in the league this year. They're obviously putting a lot of their chips into the draft basket. That's how you have to succeed in the NFL. It's always been about the draft. Ultimately, it's always going to come back to that draft. And with 11 picks this year, and with this team leading the league year over year in compensatory picks because they play that formula so well, I think it's going to be 25 comp picks over a 5-year stretch for the 49ers. with the 49ers playing the comp pick game so aggressively, that process better be buttoned up. It better be locked down. And 2024 was a very good indicator in the right direction for San Francisco, but they've got to make sure that this 2025 draft emulates that and not 2022 or 2023. Is it more of an R&D focus? Well, today Lynch had a really interesting quote. He said, well, R&D has discovered that it's more about intangibles, like the most important variables or the most important things to look at are the intangibles. And I just kind of chuckled because I figured that, R&D is supposed to make this more tangible. It's not supposed to be about intangibles. But I can't really question what 49ers R&D is doing if they can deliver another draft like the 2024 draft, when it seemed to be very R&D oriented. Of course, Ricky Pearsall in the first round, he's looking like a good player. Renardo Green is already a starter. Dominic Pooney is already a starter. Isaac Guerendo looks like a good player in the fourth round for the 49ers. So, I mean, there a lot of talent came out of that 2024 draft that can help the 49ers right away, and we'll see what they do in terms of 2025. I can verify, and this has been obvious, but the 49ers have seen the Rams. They've seen how well that's worked. They aren't afraid of trying to emulate it. Again, what I put down at the bottom of the screen, throughout the course of NFL history, it has always been about the draft. And why is that? Well, because, again, spots 10 to 53, you're not going to be able to pay big money for the entire roster. You can have 10 highly paid Hall of Famers. Great for you if you can have that. The 49ers were getting close to having 10 highly paid A-listers around the year 2023. But if you don't have the depth, spots 10 to 53 beyond that, if you're old, if you're injured, with the vast majority of your roster, even if you have a clump of superstars, this is not the NBA where rosters are only 10 to 12 players big. This is the NFL where you need to have 53 men, and all 53 of those spots are really, really important because of the nature of this grind and the physicality of this sport. So if you're not set at those positions, if you're too old and too injured at those positions, you're going to suck at special teams. 49ers were dead last year, number 32. Your run defense probably isn't going to be very good because run defense is not really superstar dependent. That's dependent on an entire roster, right? So the 49ers were number 29 in run defense last year. If you don't have a lot of team speed, and this is not just from your A-list players, but throughout up and down the lineup, you're probably not going to separate very well. 49ers ranked number 32 last year. So, I mean, if the vast majority of your roster is injured, old, and underperforming, you're going to get results like the ones that the 49ers saw in 2024, and that was a 6-11 season. So replenishing this has always been about the draft. Lazy analysis will say, well, the 49ers need to sign this free agent and that free agent at overpriced cost. It doesn't matter. It's not my money. It doesn't, regardless of who's spending the money and what it does to the cap situation, even if the 49ers can prorate the bonuses and create more cap space and make it work, is that the best football strategy? And time again, over the course of NFL history, as we've watched these teams build and teams fall, it has been proven that the draft and the cost-controlled youth is the way to go. Even if free agency is more expensive, doesn't necessarily mean that it's the better route. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's the preferred, most efficient way of making a good team. I think that you pay the really good guys, and the 49ers are doing that. They're going to continue doing that this offseason with Brock Purdy, with George Kittle, maybe even Fred Warner, and then you draft the rest. And if you can find bargain deals in free agency, go for it. Because in a way, you extend the draft that way, right? But if you're having to pay $15 million for Cooper Kupp, when maybe your limit was $5 million, right? That's a $5 million player, I would think, at this point in his career, with how the separation is diminished. Well, if you're paying $15 million for Cooper Kupp and you're going out and, the Chiefs paid $15 million for Jalen Moore, we'll see how that works out for them. That was an interesting footnote of free agency. But if you're going out there and overpaying $77 million over a few years, $19 million per year with Aaron Banks, the Green Bay Packers, if you're doing that, you're going to run into a wall really quick. It's going to be hard to be sustainable as a football team. And if there's one thing that the 49ers have showcased under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, it has been a solid degree of sustainability for San Francisco. I mean, they were first an elite team at the top of the league in 2009 19. And it's now 2025, and we're still talking about the 49ers as division favorites. Vegas actually has them as division favorites entering this 2025 season. So despite all the noise out there, I think that it's very, very apparent that they're doing something right. And I think that the noise is often not, it's a little too ignorant to figure out that there's real business strategy happening behind what the 49ers are doing. Now, a couple other things today from the owners' meetings. We talked about Kyle Juszczyk, and the 49ers are really happy to have him back. He's going to be back for 2 more years. This is something that we talked about when we looked at Kyle Juszczyk's contract, but there's guaranteed money in both of these years. They want him on that 10-year wall. Those of you who were rejoicing when Juszczyk left prematurely, I might add, I don't think you understand how important he is to this 49ers offense. Kyle Shanahan's scheme is very unique. Juszczyk has a unique role, blocking, also being deployed as a pass-catching weapon in this scheme. He challenges defenses in a way that it isn't usual. It makes the 49ers different. They have considered him a core piece. When they couldn't find the right price for him initially in the contract negotiations, they let him go test his market. And ultimately, he came back to the 49ers and they found the right price, about $3.75 million per year. So the 49ers are happy that's done. Juszczyk is one of their core pieces. By the way, everything I'm talking about in this article up on the San Francisco Standard. Link is in the description. Go ahead and check it out. If you're going to read anything from the NFL owners meetings, this is the one that you need to read. It is the most in-depth piece that there is from the 49ers owners meetings. And from John Lynch talking today, it's going to be Kyle Shanahan tomorrow at breakfast, followed by Jed York, who's going to speak, I think, at about 6 a.m. Pacific time. Kyle's going to be a little too early for you guys, 4:45 a.m. Pacific time. But I'm out here on the East Coast. I'm out here in Florida. So it's going to be 7:45 for me and then about 9 o'clock for Jed. And I think at this point, the 49ers strategy has crystallized. I think it's very clear what San Francisco is doing. We've explained it over and over again. It just so happens, I promised you guys yesterday, if you were watching the show, the first show from here from West Palm Beach, I said John Lynch was going to say a lot of what I said. And lo and behold, he said a lot of what I said here. It shouldn't be coming as a surprise anymore. It's not that hard to follow these breadcrumbs. There just is a lot of shock and awe on the internet. And I think people just want information. They want a Brock Purdy contract done. I think the 49ers and Purdy might be getting closer to that. And they want a smart team building process. And everything that the 49ers have done this offseason can be looked at through the lens of precedent. I mean, the Rams have set precedent. The Jacksonville Jaguars now, with James Gladstone as their general manager, have followed that precedent from the Rams. And when it always comes back to the draft, that's why we are in the position that we're at right now. More intel, Dre Greenlaw. We heard from Sean Payton today, the Denver Broncos head coach, about Dre Greenlaw. Let's listen in on Sean Payton talking about Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga from breakfast at the owners' meetings.
Standpoint, I mean, right, you talked about it. You know, part of the middle of the defense was DJ. Right behind him, Trey and Fonga. Right through the middle of our defense, you know, getting tough. And look, the irony is DJ shared a locker room with these guys and knows them very well. And so from a leadership and a football IQ standpoint, that was important.
It's important to have all 3 of those guys kind of go. They should have an easy adjustment period.
Yeah, I think so. I think anytime, it depends on the player. I think, look, the transition always is significant, and yet I think these guys will have a familiarity with certainly some teammates, and then also whether it be coaches, there always seems to be a couple ties in each staff. But we were excited on Wednesday. I'll be honest with you. We felt we got better.
With Hufanga, what does he bring that was missing last year?
Well, he's a great communicator. He's super intelligent. I think his experience, and there is a toughness about the way he plays. You know, sometimes you can be a second responder, sometimes a first responder, and he appears first a lot on screen. And there's a style to how he plays. And look, part of that style, because he's so physical and so quick to support, he's had a handful of injuries, but there's a toughness to his game, and you guys will like him. Something about him when you meet him and you visit with him. So that was a big get. We felt excited about that.
So you heard Sean Payton there acknowledge that he's had a lot of injuries due to his playing style. I think the same can be said about Dre Greenlaw. So there, in one little short grab from that interview, you can see why the Broncos decided to outbid the 49ers for guys like Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, but also why the 49ers decided to let themselves be outbid. Health is the big focus for the 49ers this offseason. The Broncos seem to be a lot more blasé about the health. They're saying, yeah, we want the guys that are this hungry. We'll take some of that risk. Whether or not it pays off for Denver remains to be seen. I do know the 49ers and the Broncos may conduct joint practices together. Those are being planned. I'm going to call those the Ed McCaffrey Bowl. Ed obviously played for both teams. Christian grew up in Colorado, but Ed played for the Niners in 1994, followed by the Broncos under Mike Shanahan after that. That was Ed's final NFL team. Won a couple Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos. So we'll see if the Ed McCaffrey Bowl is in Denver or if it's in Santa Clara, which would be a bowl of practices. Anyway, more with Dre Greenlaw. The 49ers obviously exercised some restraint. Based on what I understand, they offered Dre Greenlaw a one-year deal. And if you look at the Broncos deal, it wasn't all that much more valuable than 1 year in terms of guarantees. He had I think 10.5 or 11 million of guarantees on a deal worth 10.5 million annually. So Denver essentially has 3 years of team control over Dre Greenlaw, while he only has 1 year guaranteed. So it's not that valuable for Dre Greenlaw, if we want to put it that way. I think it's very clear based on the offer that he took from the Broncos and based on the offer that the 49ers gave Greenlaw, which was a little bit more lucrative than the one that Denver offered him and he eventually took. I think it's just really clear that Dre Greenlaw wanted to leave and run his own shop, be the number one guy, be the MJ, as his dad said, of the Denver Broncos, not the Scottie Pippen that he'd be with the 49ers. And Denver's got a better defense right now. Right? Denver was the number one defense in the league last year. So the 49ers will move on. They love Dre Greenlaw. We might even have one of the quotes from John Lynch on that matter right here. Dre Greenlaw is indeed a needle mover. Here it is from John Lynch. He's a needle mover. There's not many needle movers, but ultimately Greenlaw signed with the Broncos for $10.5 million annually. He'll join Talanoa Hufanga in Denver. You see the quote from Sean Payton that I just played. We felt excited about that. Those two guys are tone setters in how they play. I don't think that a 49ers update would be complete without a check-in with Jim Harbaugh.
Jake Moody? He's just like a very, very steady, confident, player in his ability. And I've seen him miss a few and then come back and make 14, 17 straight. I can't remember exactly what it was. So, I would think that it's going to repeat itself.
Harbaugh coach Jake Moody in college at Michigan. So there you hear from Jim. All right. That is what actually was said at the owners' meetings. I got the receipts to prove it. The article to prove it also up on the San Francisco Standard. So go ahead and check this out. It is ready for you. If you read anything coming out of these owners' meetings, this is what you should read. John Lynch, and again, isn't it just comical? Like, it's absolutely crazy to me. The 49ers are going to end up as a top 2 or 3 spending team once this is all done. And then, I mean, I'm just looking at all these takes, and I'm looking at how this offseason's been interpreted by some, and it's like, what is going on? I think that it never needed to be as dramatic as social media. There was never a need to be dramatic. The 49ers are executing a typical NFL roster renovation that we probably should have seen last year, but instead it's happening after they decided to prolong the run following Super Bowl heartbreak. Instead, we're seeing it here in 2025. Anyway, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. That is the article. It is up on the screen. Go check it out. San Francisco Standard is where you're going to find the most in-depth 49ers coverage. Look at that. 1,500 words from John Lynch today. Everything that I might not have covered in this video is going to be covered in the article. Link is ready for you. Everybody, thanks for watching. It's off to the NFL League meeting party. We'll talk to you soon.